What's good, peeps? Joe Passarelli here. Another dedication video to put out. I know kind of a somber vibe out of the Joe Passarelli channel here today. Friday, May 23rd, 2014. Two tragic events happened this week in wrestling history. Obviously, 3 years ago this week, it was the Macho Man Randy Savage who tragically passed on at the wheel at the young age of 62 years old. Also, this week in wrestling history, I cannot believe this. 15 years ago this week, the legendary Owen Hart is a action figure of Owen Hart, which I have found amongst my travels in recent years. The legendary Owen Hart tragically passed away, falling cataclysmically to his death from the Raptors. Of course, if you don't know, I'll give you the brief synopsis of what was going on. Owen Hart was kind of floating around in the WWF at the time in 1998. Vince Russo and company and the writers didn't really know what to do with the Black Heart, with the sole survivor himself, Owen Hart. Obviously, this was about a year removed from Bret's departure to WCW, which of course we all know was an ultimate flop and an ultimate fail, and Bret just didn't fit in there and was not booked right, despite being a world champion there. Just, quite frankly, wasn't him. It wasn't a hitman. And of course, I know to this day, Bret probably carries a lot of weight for not being there, and to have his brothers back, and maybe to have him overshoot the idea. Well, anyway, Owen Hart was reprising a character he had used in the early 90s, known as the Blue Blazer, which in the 90s was a jobber character. A superhero-like character who was kind of ignorant to his own disbelief. So, they have the match, 1999, the pay-per-view Over the Limit, live. I believe this was in Kansas City, Missouri, if memory does serve me correctly. And they have the idea to do similar to what WCW was doing with Sting, drop the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart, from the Raptors before on a rope and pulleys. Very similar to Sting in WCW. And as the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart was going to be wrestling the Godfather on Over the Limit 1999. Tragically, there was an accident. The cord broke. Owen fell, hit his head on the turnbuckle, tragically passed away moments later. Jim Ross had the unfortunate duty to tell the whole world that Owen Hart tragically passed away. Of course, the pay-per-view did continue, which I think to this day is a controversial decision. I mean, I've been involved in wrestling on small levels, and if I was involved with a show or running a show where someone had tragically plummeted to their death, I think the show would be over at that point, and the suspension of disbelief would be a little bit too real, as you know, an athlete, a wrestler, a superstar had just passed away. So, obviously, 15 years later, my condolences still go out to the Hart family, to Martha, and to Owen's son, whose name eludes me at the moment. 15 years later, that tragic incident happened in Kansas City, Missouri. Of course, we all know Bret the Hitman Hart wrestled Chris Benoit in the dedication match to Owen Hart on WCW television on Monday Nitro a few months later, when Nitro went to the Kansas City arena where Owen Hart had tragically passed away. We also know that the WWE did do a very classy tribute that Monday night on Raw, which featured Edge and Jeff Jarrett and Triple H in the locker room, really bearing their soul about Owen Hart. I mean, so tragic. I really can't believe it's 15 years later. I remember waking up that morning, listening to what was then Sports Radio 790, The Score in Providence, Rhode Island, and Andy Gresh, who now works for Boston radio station 98.5 The Sports Hub, was doing a morning show with the coach Coletto, and he broke the news to me as I was waking up. They were talking about Owen Hart, and I knew for them to be on a Providence sports radio show talking about Owen Hart at 8 o'clock in the morning, that was not a good sign. Found out about the news, watched Raw that night, of course. My thoughts and prayers still go out. 15 years later, I still feels like it runs very deep with the whole wrestling community, IWC, YWC or not. I feel like this pushed a lot of people away from wrestling. A lot of fans of the Hart family, of Owen Hart, for a tragic incident like this to happen on Vince McMahon's watch, obviously was very unfortunate. And I did say in previous videos I was going to do a video on Owen Hart, and I'm glad I timed it on the day. 15 years later since the tragic passing of Owen Hart. Still in our hearts. R.I.P. Owen Hart. R.I.P. Macho Man. R.I.P. Ultimate Warrior. Eddie Guerrero. And all the great wrestlers who lost their life early and in the process of entertaining all of us, quite frankly. Owen Hart, we love you. You're no Black Hart to us. You'll always be the sole survivor, the youngest of the Hart family, arguably the most charismatic, the most charming, and we will miss you forever, Owen Hart, and I hope someday the WWE and Martha Hart can come to some kind of reconciliation, and the WWE can finally put Owen Hart where he belongs, and that's in the WWE Hall of Fame. Folks, what are your thoughts? Subscribe. This is Joe Passarelli. R.I.P. Owen.